There's a magic to the making of movies, some of it admittedly romanticized, but there's still a fascination with how artists come together to create a story using visuals and sounds. Today, I'm going to celebrate the craft of filmmaking by naming my favorite documentaries about movies. Some of these are about an individual filmmaker, while few focus on the making of a specific movie. All of these do an impressive job of detailing how some classic films came about and the people who made them. My Best Fiend. There are many well-known director-actor collaborations, but maybe the most wild of them all is the one between Werner Herzog and Klaus Kinski. Kinski was famous for being a temperamental fellow, to put it lightly, and he often fought with Herzog on the sets of their films. This documentary examines their relationship with Herzog's usual intelligence and humor. Through the course of the film, we're given plenty of archival footage of the confrontations they had while making the likes of Aguirre the Wrath of God and Fitzcarraldo. Watching those moments, you wonder how the movies were even completed. It's a fascinating portrait of a man who was clearly unhinged, and the director who tried his hardest, though not always successfully, not to lose his patience with him. Of course, Herzog makes for an entertaining host, and he manages to give us a sense of this oddball relationship. This film is not yet rated. I have long been fascinated by the MPAA rating system and the decisions made in how they choose to classify movies. Kirby Dick presents a fascinating look into the history of the organization and the whole process, with particular emphasis on the NC-17 rating and the stress it causes many a filmmaker. He interviews a wide variety of directors like John Waters and Kimberly Pierce, who have dealt with the ratings board, and also shows the hypocrisy of some of their decisions. The film is critical of the MPAA while also trying to figure out ways to improve the ratings board and make it more fair. If you've ever found yourself puzzled by a ratings reason, this is a documentary you'll want to check out. Frank and Ollie. While I like plenty of flashy documentaries, I also appreciate documentaries that are willing to slow down and let you take in the subject. Frank and Ollie is mostly content to interview legendary Disney animators Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnston and have them tell stories of their craft and their time in the Walt Disney Studios. I could listen to these two talk for hours, although director Theodore Thomas does an excellent job of getting the footage down to 90 minutes. There's wonderful use of archive footage and their raw animation, and it makes you appreciate their talents even more. Honestly, the film could just consist of these two sitting at a table and being interviewed, and I would still be riveted. This is a sweet and touching documentary on two individuals who played such a key role in some of the most beloved animated films of all time. The Pixar Story. The famed computer animation studio is a dominant force in the field, but its road also involved a lot of uncertainties. However, they managed to pull through and create modern classics like Toy Story and The Incredibles. Directed by Leslie Iwerks, this documentary goes through their history up until Ratatouille. It not only works as a look at the company's evolution, but also computer animation in general, and how it has changed and become more popular over the years. Each film is given a decent amount of time to go over their accomplishments, as well as the production difficulties that can happen with any animated movie. Iwerks packs a lot of information into the documentary's 87 minutes. As a fan of the Hopping Lamps movies, the Pixar Story provides a more than satisfying look at the studio's development and process. Spielberg. I'm a massive fan of the work of Steven Spielberg, and this HBO documentary is a comprehensive look at his life and career. Running almost 2.5 hours, director Susan Lacey brings together a massive amount of names to talk about the magic of Spielberg's movies as well as their making. The film also touches on his personal life, like his relationship to Judaism and how he's been able to build a family, and the ways in which these have influenced the projects he has taken on. We see how important each movie is to him, and why he's been able to become one of the most successful directors of all time, resulting in a very inspiring documentary. Charlie, The Life and Art of Charles Chaplin. My favorite director of all time, this documentary does a superb job of looking at his life and the movies he made. Richard Schickel takes us through this journey, going from his time growing up in the slums of London to his rise in Hollywood, and then his eventual exile from the United States. All sorts of filmmakers, actors, family members, and critics come together to give their views on Chaplin, and what a brilliant comedic mind he was. It also does not shy away from the controversies that followed Chaplin over the course of his life, like the many women he got romantically involved with. Charlie Chaplin is an important cinematic icon, and if you want to learn about him, this documentary, as well as his autobiography, are fantastic places to start. Persistence of Vision. Richard Williams spent several decades working on his animated spectacle The Thief and the Cobbler, only to see it ripped away from him. Kevin Schreck pieces together an incredible amount of news footage of the production, as well as interviews with some of the animators who worked on the movie to give an insight into Williams' thought process and why the production was so lengthy. The documentary also goes over Williams' career as a whole, including his time producing commercials and working on Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Through it all, we see an incredibly dedicated artist who somehow never lost faith that The Thief and the Cobbler could be completed. Of course, that makes the inevitable ending all the more heartbreaking. If you're as fascinated by the making of The Thief and the Cobbler as I am, then you won't find a more comprehensive documentary on the subject. Waking Sleeping Beauty. Directed by longtime Disney producer Don Hahn, this presents an incredible account of a 10-year period in Disney Animation's history, from 1984 to 1994. That era saw a remarkable change of the studio is depicted via home movies, audio interviews, and clips of the films they made. However, the documentary does not just go over the happy times. We're also told of some of the difficult moments and the corporate infighting that came about when making Beauty and the Beast and Aladdin. Most importantly, it gives attention to those who deserve it the most. The incredibly talented animators and artists who were instrumental in making these beloved movies we continue to cherish to this day. One of the nicest treats comes from footage shot by Randy Cartwright in the 80s and early 90s that highlight what the animation studio was like during that time. It would be nice to see Don Hahn make a sequel, but Waking Sleeping Beauty nonetheless represents an incredible peek behind the scenes at Walt Disney Animation. The Tramp and the Dictator. Detailing the making of Charlie Chaplin's The Great Dictator, this fascinating documentary also looks at how, despite Chaplin and Adolf Hitler being born only a few days apart, one chose to make the world a better place through comedy, while the other chose the path of hatred and destruction instead. Directors Kevin Brownlow and Michael Kloft show how Hitler's evil dictatorship fueled Chaplin's desire to mock him, and we get further insight through the various interview subjects. Most impressive is the use of then recently discovered color film, showing the behind-the-scenes creation of The Great Dictator, giving us a look at how Chaplin directed his movies. What I also love about this documentary is its ultimate thesis, that humor and optimism are the best weapons against the evils of the world. Chaplin knew that when he made The Great Dictator, and that's why the film will remain a relevant piece of cinema. Now, before I name my number one choice, I want to bring up an honorable mention. That's entertainment. The reason I did not include this on the list proper is because it's more of a clip show rather than a traditional documentary. It's pretty much a celebration of classic MGM musicals, as the likes of Gene Kelly, Debbie Reynolds, and Fred Astaire come out to introduce clips from a whole host of movie musicals. It's a wonderful experience getting to see all of these scenes together and the incredible artistry of the filmmakers and choreographers who put them together. It must have been a thrill for audiences in 1974 to experience seeing these on the big screen, either again or for the first time. It's a joy to watch, so I felt I had to include it somewhere. Anyway, my number one favorite documentary about movies is Stanley Kubrick, A Life in Pictures. I have long been a massive fan of Kubrick's movies, and so it makes sense that a documentary about his career would be appealing to me. However, Jan Holland not only provides a look at the making of his films, he also explores precisely what made him tick. A Life in Pictures goes through everything in an incredibly well-paced 2 hours and 22 minutes, giving the proper time and attention to every single one of his films, even the lesser-known ones like Killer's Kiss. The documentary talks to every person possible, his family, his actors, assistants, production team, co-writers, critics, other filmmakers, and even studio executives, as they talk about their relationship to Kubrick and his movies. There is an incredible amount of home movie footage ranging from Kubrick as a child to his adult years on set and at home. A Life in Pictures even talks about the films he wanted to make but was unable to, and what led to Steven Spielberg directing AI, artificial intelligence. It goes into the Kubrick myths, as well as his infamously precise directorial style. Everything you ever wanted to know about Stanley Kubrick is featured in this documentary, and watching it really does put you in the mood to marathon his movies. And that's why it takes the number one spot. Let me know in the comments what your favorite documentaries about movies are, and I'll see you next time.